Hi, I'm Stu from Hive Mind Automation and welcome back to the Hive. In this video, we're going to be unboxing and reviewing the Ikea Fyrtur Smart Blind. We're going to take a look at what's in the box. I'm going to install it in my kitchen window over there, and we're going to get it set up standalone. Then we'll get it set up in the Ikea Smart app. And lastly, we're going to take a look at setting it up in Home Assistant. So while I roll the intro, why don't you take a moment to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you get notified when I release new videos each week, and let's get started. Now, when we first moved into this house, coming up to about 7 years ago, it was a brand new build, so none of the windows had blinds or curtains. The window in the kitchen proved challenging for a couple of reasons. It's right next to the fridge cavity, and with a wide fridge like ours, anything sticking outside the window frame is going to foul on the fridge door, which leads to the second challenge, which is that the frame is around 850 millimeters wide and the window about 800 millimeters wide. All of the off-the-shelf blinds that I could find at Bunnings are 900 or 600, and you have to modify them to cut them down to fit within this window frame. In order to solve that problem, we got this extremely cheap option to cover the window, and we ended up cutting it down to size. The blind itself is made of PVC and it's on a cardboard tube. Now, the reason I mention that it's extremely cheap is because the latch mechanism on the spring tensioner broke within about a week. And if you remember some of those cartoons you might have watched as a kid, where the blinds like this would roll up and then spin around, we saw that happen once or twice. So with that latch mechanism broken, we've been manually rolling and unrolling the blind ever since then. And as I say, it's been nearly 7 years. Now, because of this manual process, we almost never open this blind, and that's a shame because it does let in quite a decent amount of natural light into the kitchen area. Now, I finally got annoyed enough at this blind that I decided that I wanted to replace it with something smart. Thankfully, Ikea has their Fyrtur line of smart blinds that aren't super expensive, they look pretty nice, and they're smart, even if their name isn't easy to pronounce. To any Swedes that are watching, please accept my apologies for most likely butchering these names. Now, it did take a while for the Fyrtur range to come to Australia, but now that they're readily available here, it's definitely worth mentioning that they are not exactly cheap. But I did order one that should fit this window just about perfectly. Now, this blind, which is the 80 centimeter wide variant, cost $239 plus shipping. There is a 60 centimeter variant for $199, a 100 centimeter wide variant for $259. There is a 120 centimeter wide variant for $279, and a 140 centimeter wide variant for $299. There's also the quadrilge range of smart blinds from Ikea, and those are just a filtered light, not a full block out like the Fyrtur blind, and they also come in the same widths, so 100, 80, 140, 120, and 60 centimeters. And they're around $20 to $30 cheaper than the Fyrtur range. Now, something to note, while the Fyrtur are full block out, which is fantastic, they do only come in this grey colour. Now, I took a sneaky peek at the PDF version of the assembly documentation in preparation for this video so that I would know what to expect. And that tells me that inside the box I should expect to see a battery and a USB cable to charge the battery with, and those are used to power the unit. So this unit is battery powered. And looking at some FAQs about the Fyrtur blinds, we should expect that normal usage will give us around 4 to 6 months before needing to recharge the battery, and that's with normal usage of up and down once a day. And it takes between 4 to 5 hours with the Ikea charger to charge the battery. Now, also based on this, we have the IKEA charger, which is a USB charger, and we also have this Zigbee repeater as well, and that's just a repeater to improve the wireless signal. According to the FAQ page, that is required to run this. I'm going to test that theory out though to see whether or not I can run it without that, because I do have the trad-free bridge and I have a bunch of other trad-free accessories that are not that don't seem to require any kind of extender. We also get a standard rocker switch remote, which gives us both up and down function, and a battery to drive that remote. We have the mounting brackets, 2 of those mounting brackets, and the great thing here is so they can mount either on a vertical surface or a horizontal surface. And obviously we have the instructions for installation here in the PDF version of the manual. If you haven't checked out the PDF version of IKEA manuals before, the assembly instructions, I highly recommend doing that before you go to committing to a purchase of any IKEA devices, because it gives you a great idea of how difficult or easy the assembly or installation of a particular unit is going to be. In this case, it looks like it's going to be pretty easy. We just need to mount the brackets into the window frame, and then we clip the blind up into the play. We put the battery in and we should be good to go. Now, it is pretty cool that the battery charges off the USB, and it's also worth mentioning, if we take a look back at the IKEA website, that you can also purchase additional batteries for $20. So if you are going to have lots of these blinds in your home, it might be worth getting a couple of extra batteries just so that you can just swap them in and out and not have to wait that 4 to 5 hours for the charging to complete. So I'm just going to cut open the tape here, try not to slip and cut myself. Okay, so inside the little accessory packet, we've got our Zigbee repeater, our remote, and the battery for the remote. We have a manual for the Braunit battery, a USB cable for the Braunit battery, the Braunit battery itself, a USB charger for the Australian plug, and our 2 mounting brackets. If I pull the blind out, we've got our manual here, obviously not the PDF version. Personally, I think I prefer the PDF version. Just going to take these styrofoam end caps off the blind, and we can see the blind itself. It feels quite good. The fabric is sturdy. There's a nice feel to this weight here. I don't really like this tag hanging down. I'm pretty sure we can tear that off a bit later. I'll worry about that after we've installed it. The track at the top is an aluminium extrusion. It feels pretty good, and I can feel, so this is the motor end. So the IKEA FAQ says that you can't modify these, but you could theoretically cut down the aluminium and then the tube that's inside here without causing too much damage. So long as you don't do it from the end that has the battery housing, you should be fine. Now, speaking of the battery housing, if we open that up, you can see the contacts to install the battery onto there. And just to the left of the battery housing, we've got some kind of very subtle tactile buttons. So up and down, and it looks like there's a little LED in there that maybe is an indicator of some kind. And this sticker on here, which you could theoretically pull off, which I'm assuming is the link symbol to indicate that this is the link button. Now, according to the IKEA FAQ page, the included remote should already be paired to this blind, so we shouldn't need to worry too much about that link button. We'll find that out once we've got it installed up in the window frame. So all in all, the build quality feels pretty good. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to pause the camera. I'm going to plug the battery into USB so that it can charge up. I'm going to assume that it's not fully charged out of the box, because that would be fairly standard, especially as it appears that this is a lithium ion battery. It feels like it's probably two 18650 batteries inside this plastic housing here. And there's 4 contacts on the end, which would make sense for battery management. So it is a 7.2 volt, 18.72 watt hour battery, and it's got a input of 5 volts, 1 amp max, or it can take in 8.4 volts at 2 amps max using the 4-pin connector, which is interesting. So apparently there's a way to charge it off the 4-pin connector, and it'll output 7.2 volts at 2 amps max. So I'm going to plug this into USB, make sure that it's charged up. I'm not sure if there's an indicator on here. Let me see. Yep. So there's a little indicator light on the end of the battery. I'm not sure you can see that on camera. Maybe try this camera. Yep. There we go. So we will see how that goes, and in the meantime, as I say, I'm going to pause the camera there. We're going to first of all remove the blind that's in there, and then I'm going to install this one in the window frame. Okay, so obviously the first thing that I needed to do was to remove the old blind and the mounting hardware for it. And while I was at it, I also filled the holes with some poly trim and door filler, so that later on we can come back and we can repaint the window frame so that it is nice and clean. The next step is to install the 2 mounting brackets about 16 centimeters in from either end of the frame. Now, it doesn't need to be an exact measurement, but I did use my measuring tape to get it there. Now, once the mounting hardware is in the blind, the instructions say to put it up into the frame and then mark with a pencil where you want to mount the mounting hardware, and then remove the mounting hardware and then screw it into place. What I did instead is I used some double-sided Gorilla Tape to put the mounting brackets up into the frame, and then I unclipped the blind from those mounting brackets so that the mounting brackets would stay behind. Now, unlike Ikea, they didn't include any mounting screws, so I chose some mounting screws from my screw selection. And I screwed those screws in and made sure that they were nice and snug. Now, while I was mounting it, I also made sure that the front edge of the housing was flush with, there's kind of an inner molding in the window frame. I made sure that the front edge of the housing was flush and parallel with that so that it wouldn't look out of place. And then once the mounting hardware was up, I was able to clip the blind back into place and then plug in the battery. I also decided that I was going to plug in the USB repeater. I suspect that I probably don't need it, but I've plugged it in anyway. It's just a USB Zigbee repeater. I might do some experiments without the Zigbee repeater plugged in and see whether or not I run into trouble. I also took a moment to put a battery into the remote and plugged everything in, and confirmed that the remote included in the box is in fact pre-paired to the blind, which is great. So after loading the batteries up, we were good to go, and I tested it out. Now, because the blind comes with a 195 centimeter drop, but my window frame is only 180 centimeters tall, I needed to set the maximum extension of the blind. Now, I found some online instructions so that I could do just that. And to set the maximum extension, you close the blind to the maximum distance that you want to set it to. And then on the body of the blind itself, tap the down button twice quickly, and it will then retract the blind a little and then extend it back to that bottom depth. And that will then be the full extension of the blind. And then when you tap the down button on the remote once, it will only open to that full extension. Speaking of tapping the button on the remote, once you tap the button once to fully open or fully close the blind, you can press and hold and then release when you get to the opened or closed setting that you want to keep on the blind. So now that it's set up in the window, the remote works great. I love it already. We're going to actually take a moment to set it up in the IKEA Smart Home app. So I'm going to open up IKEA Home Smart, and we're going to tap the cog in the top right hand corner and then tap Add New Device. And we're looking for a blind, either a quadrilled or a Fyrtur. Going to tap blind, and it says we need the gateway, the blind, the signal repeater, and the open close remote. We're going to hit get started, and we're going to tap next and insert the battery. We've already done that. We'll tap next again. We're going to reset the open close remote by tapping the pair button 4 times, 1, 2, 3, 4, and we get a red light flashing inside. We'll tap next again, and now we need to go and pair the open close remote with the gateway. So I'm going to go into the other room with the open close remote, and I'm going to press and hold the button for 2 seconds next to the gateway. Great, so that has discovered the device. We're going to wait a moment for it to complete that pairing action. And it says it couldn't be added, so we need to start again, make sure the battery hasn't run out. Just going to do that again. Okay, so it's found the open close remote. We'll hit OK. We'll tap next, and we're going to pair the signal repeater. So we're going to go and stand next to that, hold the remote within 2 centimeters, and press and hold the pairing button again. Device found, perfect. Signal repeater found, so we'll hit OK. And now we need to make sure that the battery is in the blind, which it already is. We'll tap next, and now we're going to go and pair the blind to the remote. Now we need to short press both buttons on the body of the blind together, and then there will be a white light on the blind indicating that it's awake and ready for pairing. And then we need to bring the open close remote next to the pairing button and press and hold the pairing button on the remote, and we should see a red light on the remote and a white light on the blind, which will dim and flash a few times. So we're going to be holding this button for about 20 seconds. So I will head over to the blind, and we will put it into pairing mode and press and hold the pairing button on the remote. I can see the red LED, and the white LED is pulsating on the blind, and the blind just moved down and up a couple of centimeters. I'm guessing that means that it is paired. Okay, it's found the device. Blind found, perfect. Blind is now connected to the IKEA Home Smart. We'll hit tap OK, and we can now close the back of the remote. Okay, so it says we can now close the back of the remote, and we can also set the max length of the blind. The max length of the blind is already set, so I'm just going to tap done, and we'll back out to the main menu. And we have group 6, and we've got a slider to open or close the blind. I'm going to tap to the very left, and it's going to open the blind slowly. Okay, so that opened the blind, and I can grab the slider and go to 50%. And there's a nice animation across the screen as it moves, and you also see there's a pause button that appears in the top right section there as well. And so that's at 50%, and I can also tap the icon to the very right to close the blind to the full extension, which we set before setting up the blind with the app. And that stopped at my previous setting. So the app is pretty cool. I'm going to tap the settings here. I'm going to go manage, and I want to go blinds, and I want to tap on the three dots next to group 6, and I want to rename to kitchen, because that's where it is, and we'll tap the tick and then back out, and we've got kitchen there. Perfect. Okay, so now that we can control the blind using the Ikea Home Smart app, and it's actually pretty cool, the amount of control that we have over the blind, which I'm very impressed by. What I'm going to do now is set it up in Home Assistant, and I'm doing that in my production instance here. So we'll go to configuration, and the new versions of Home Assistant, the integrations menu has been put into devices and services. So we'll tap on devices and services. We've got integrations across the top here. Now I'm looking for my Ikea Home, which you can see is the Ikea Trad-free here, and it's got 10 devices and 9 entities. I'm going to click on the three dot stack, and I'm just going to reload that integration. And it was reloaded, and you might have seen that that number has now changed to 12 devices and 11 entities. So if I drill in there, we'll see we've got Trad-free blind, and we've got the Trad-free open close remote. So if I go to the blind, we'll just click on the icon to the left of it and click on the controls here. We'll see that we've got the different things that we can do here. So we've got the model, it's a Fyrtur block out roller blind, and that's all that's inside the attributes. I can grab the position and go to 50%, and it's going to open up to 50%, and it does the animation here as well. Now interestingly, in the closed position, this is all the way across to the left, whereas in the app it was all the way across to the right. So I can tap the up button, and it's going to open the cover all the way, and in a moment we will tap the down button, and it's going to close the cover all the way. So that's open, and we'll close it now. So because we already had the Ikea integration in play, we didn't need to do anything special to get that paired. If you haven't seen my previous video about integrating Ikea smart home devices into Home Assistant, I will put a link in the top right of the screen now so that you can check that out. But if you've already got it in Home Assistant, it is super easy to get that set up. So now that that's set up, I don't want to just leave it there. I'm also going to set up an automation to close the blind at sunset, and I'm also going to set one to open the blind at 8 AM as well. And I might adjust those timings later after we live with it for a while, but that should let a good amount of natural light in through that kitchen window so that we can operate without having to use the lights. So to do that, I'm going to go back to configuration, and I'm going to go to automations and scenes, and I'm going to click add automation, and I'm not going to use a blueprint. I'm just going to start with an empty automation. I'm going to call this kitchen, all in uppercase, because that's how I organize my automations now. And I'm going to go open blind at 8 AM. The triggers are going to be time, and at a fixed time of 0800. And I'm going to add a condition that the state of blind, the Trad-free blind, is going to be, I'm just going to open my developer tools here quickly in another tab, and I'm going to go to, I want to grab the Trad-free blind there, and I just want to check the state that it is in. Okay, so looking at the Trad-free blind, the attribute that I want is current position. So what I'm going to do is pop back over here, and the attribute I want is current position, and the state that I want it in is 0. So that will mean that it is closed. What I'm going to do, going to tap the button which is on the table here just to open the blind while we're finishing this up, and we're going to call a service, and the service that we want to call is cover.openCover, and so cover.open, and we're going to choose a device, and the only device we've got is trad-free blind, so that's going to then open that cover at 8 a.m. So I'm going to save that automation, and I'm just going to go back and check the attributes. So it's got our current position is now 100. I'm going to firstly click the 3-dot stack over here, and I'm going to duplicate this automation, and what I'm going to do is close blind at sunset, and our triggers are going to be sun, going to go sunset. I'm going to leave the offset alone, and our conditions, I want the state, so the current position needs to be greater than 0. I think that's going to work. I'm not 100% sure. We'll find out. So then the action that we want to take is we're going to go cover close. So the mistake that I've made here with this automation is that I didn't have a device chosen, so we'll add the trad-free blind. We're going to hit save, and I'm going to run the actions. Okay, great. So we now have a couple of automations for the kitchen blind. We're opening the blind at 8 a.m. and we're closing the blind at sunset. I'm probably going to burn through the battery really quickly, opening and closing it 63 times today, but that's okay. It is a rechargeable battery. So that is the Fyrtur battery operated wireless smart blind from Ikea. So let's quickly break down a couple of pros and cons. For the pros, the Fyrtur is a full blockout blind. The installation is pretty easy, and it's all battery operated and wireless. And according to the FAQs, you'll get about 4 to 6 months on a single charge. It is Zigbee, which means that you can potentially get away without having to use the Ikea proprietary bridge. And obviously that also means that it is wireless. One of the other benefits of Zigbee is that Zigbee devices create a mesh network, so they extend their own network as you add more devices. It does come with an included remote, unlike some of the Ikea light bulbs. And from what I've seen, it's the cheapest all-in-one smart blind that also actually looks good. And being Ikea, they have a good guarantee of 5 years on the full operation of the device. Now for the cons, it's pricey for a blind. At $239 plus shipping for this particular unit, I can't say that I'm going to go out and buy a whole bunch more. That being said, that's the only window that I really needed a blind for. Everything else has curtains. To use the native Ikea app, you need to get the separate trad-free bridge. You can also, if you are going to only hook it into Home Assistant, use something like the Nortec or a Conbi Zigbee stick with ZHA, the Zigbee Home Assistant integration in Home Assistant. And you could do that without having to worry about the trad-free bridge. But if you want to use the Ikea app, you need that bridge, and it's not included in any kits that I've seen. One of the other cons that I've seen is that I've not seen them any wider than 140 centimeters. I've got some windows here that are 180 plus centimeters. And that leads me into another downside, which is that they're not customizable. Ikea don't support cutting them down to fit the window. And while they've got a bunch of different sizes from 60 up to 140 centimeters, it's not always possible to find the right size. Now, while modifications are possible and there are tutorials on the internet for how to do it, personally, I wouldn't want to be cutting a blind that cost more than $200, knowing that the manufacturer is not going to provide me any support past that point. Did I miss any pros or cons of this blind? Let me know in the comments section down below. All in all, I'm super happy with the Fyrtur blind. It looks a heap better than the old PVC one we had, but obviously that wouldn't be hard. And now that this is in play, we're more likely to actually open and close that blind to let more natural light in. With the automation that's also in play now, that's going to make sure that the blind opens and closes at appropriate times of the day as well. I might need to adjust the timings of those automations, but for now, that should be pretty good. The other great thing with a blind like this is we can actually use it in some automations to make it look like someone is home, even if we were away. By opening and closing the blinds at certain times of day, it's going to look a little bit more like the house is occupied, so we could go on holiday and not necessarily draw attention to the fact that no one's home, and that's another great thing about having a smart home. Another thing I should be able to do by opening the smart blind during the day is save a little bit of energy on lighting by not turning on the kitchen lights if the light in the kitchen is above a certain threshold. That is all we have for this video, and I do hope that it's helped you out in your home automation journey. Be sure to comment down below with your thoughts on the Fyrtur blinds and home automation ideas that you'd like to see covered in future videos. Don't forget to follow HiveMind Automation on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, and those links are in the video description below. If you enjoyed this video, hit the thumbs up button down below to give it a like, and take a moment to subscribe now if you're not already subscribed. While you're at it, take a moment to hit the bell icon and you'll get notified when I release new videos each week. If you are currently in the market for a VPN provider, I've put an affiliate link for NordVPN in the video description as well. I've chosen to partner with NordVPN because they have the best infrastructure of any of the VPN providers that I've looked into. They have a strict no logs policy and they have servers all over the planet. On top of that, there's apps for just about every platform, including Windows, Mac, Linux, iOS, and Android. So whether you are on a phone or a laptop or your personal computer, you can protect your information while you browse the web wherever you are in the world. So get a VPN today and use my link below to sign up for NordVPN. Lastly, if you like what I'm doing here but you're not in the market for a VPN, there's a Buy Me a Coffee link in the video description down below, and contributions made through the Buy Me a Coffee link will be put towards making more and better content for you to enjoy. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Stu from HiveMind Automation, and I'm looking forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.